could see it clearly at a glance. This third brother of mine is really lucky. The spring-autumn Dharma Lord observed for a while and chuckled. It's actually an inheritance with a transcendent will. Even God King Heaven punishment, and I only had 1 or 2 such inheritances when we were grade 4 supreme gods. He smiled and shook his head, not minding. To him, and God King Heaven punishment, only the legacy of the eternal immortal realm could make them greedy. Inheritance with transcendent will, at most, it would provide them with some reference value for their future path. It was not worth them taking the risk to take action. Furthermore, spring-autumn Dharma Lord had countless myriad worlds chaos pools and was not interested in attacking the inheritance on Zhou Zhou. He retracted his gaze and continued to focus on fishing. Time passed quickly. At night, in the reincarnation sacred palace of the blazing sun divine capital, Zhou Fight was looking at the battle report in front of him. Under the joint efforts of the 5 battlefields, the battlefield of the High Continent, the battlefield of the ultimate void Great Cosmos, the battlefield of Tianjun's corpse, the battlefield of the Crimson Great Cosmos, and the Yellow River Domain. The statistics were calculated. The Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had obtained a total of about 10 levels of mist cores, origin crystals, skill books, equipment, and basic materials today. 318 capital units 2, 387, 283, 748, 231, 718 green bronze tier Lord Talent crystal fragments from capital units. 48,162 units of Chaos Divine Treasure. 823,871,927 legendary tier and below Lord Talent spheres. A large number of Lord Talent crystal fragments of other levels. There were also 173 Guy units, 2,387 capital units, 2 quadrillion, 387 trillion, 348,734,815,000 divine crystals from low-tier deity level to high-tier deity level. 231,342,129,731,821 true God-tier divine crystals. 8237, 171, 624, 376 Master God-tier divine crystals. 6,623,972. 837 Grade 1 to Grade 3 Supreme God Divine Crystals. 12,311 Supreme Saint Crystals. 712 capital units had 238,623,782,381 low-tier deity level to high-tier deity level divine artifacts. 412, 128, 93 million true God-tier divine artifacts. 91,232,371 Master God-tier divine artifacts. 12,332,371 Supreme God divine artifacts. 1,789 Will holy artifacts. 1 transcendent holy artifact. There were a total of about 182,332,789,800 divine spark fragments. God-tier herbs, God-tier ingredients, God-tier ores, God-tier blueprints, and other treasures in capital units. 3 capital units, 3 quadrillion, 412 trillion, 239 billion, 843,118,172 Master God-tier herbs, God-tier ingredients, God-tier ores, God-tier blueprints, and other treasures. 587,431,321 Supreme God-level God-tier herbs, God-tier ingredients, God-tier ores, God-tier blueprints, and other treasures. 18,121 Supreme Will Realm God-tier herbs, God-tier ingredients, God-tier ores, God-tier blueprints, and other treasures. 121 Willpower level God-tier herbs, God-tier ingredients, God-tier ores, God-tier blueprints, and other treasures. In terms of insight defection, Zhou Zhou's various clones had used the 2 insight defection skills of the Land of Earth, a Minister of the King, and the Son of Destiny today, to instigate a total of 231 Guy Unit 2,387 Capital Unit Soldiers, 812, 347, 89, 27 God Spirits, 143, 137, 4289 True God Tiers, 2,583,467 supremacy gods, 1,231 supreme gods, and 512 quasi-supreme will realms. In addition, the Lords of the Star Alliance had also instigated 8,121 capital unit soldiers, 341,148,910,000 god spirits, more than 45 million true god tiers, and 52,311 supremacies and gods. In the end, in terms of the advancement of god spirits, there were a total of 3,413,348,923,714,237 million legendary tier advanced grade soldiers who had advanced to low-tier deity level elementary grade god spirits. There were also 143,434,713, 497 high-tier deity level advanced grade god spirits who had advanced to true god tier elementary grade god spirits. Another 1,813,451 top-notch true gods of the human race, and 8,125,411 top-notch true gods of the people of foreign races felt their master god tier bottleneck and applied to enter the reincarnation sacred palace to cultivate in seclusion in an attempt to break through to the master god tier realm. Furthermore, there were 371 master god tier advanced grade god spirits who had sensed their advancement bottleneck and were also preparing to enter the reincarnation sacred palace today to advance to a grade 1 supreme god. In the end, there were 7 quasi-supreme will realm experts who had already reached the limit of the will divine transformation realm and were prepared to enter the reincarnation sacred palace tonight to advance to the low-level supreme will realm. Zhou Zhou's original military strength was 582 Guy units, 2,687 capital units, 582 sextillion, 268 quintillion, 734 quadrillion, 476 trillion, 324 billion, 734,839,891 god spirits, 74.35 billion, 1,819 true god tier god spirits, 6,378,780 master gods, 988 supreme gods, 89 quasi-supreme will realm experts, and 3 supreme will realm experts. With the addition of these divine spirit experts who had instigated the insight defection and the 5 supreme gods and 15 master gods recruited from the chaotic mystic realm, the military strength under him had reached 81 Guy units, 434 quintillion, 978 quadrillion, 238 trillion, 328 billion, 134,781,293 soldiers from 4 quadrillion, 26 trillion, 473 billion, 368,124,242 god spirits, 36,085,895 true gods, 9,605 supreme gods, 2,219 master gods, 606 quasi-supreme will realm experts, and 3 supreme will realm expert. A look of surprise appeared on Zhou Zhou's face after he read it. His breathing could not help but quicken. There are actually 7 quasi-supreme will realm experts who are about to advance to the low-level supreme will realm. There were only 2 yesterday. Good boy. Even without counting the future, as long as they successfully advances, there will be as many as 9 supreme will realm experts under me. There are only more than 50 supreme will realm experts in the entire supreme great cosmos. By tomorrow, the supreme will realm experts under me are already nearly 1/5 of the entire supreme great cosmos. Exaggerated, Zhou Zhou lamented. Furthermore, he had a feeling that this was only the beginning. With the supreme luck and the only Lord talent, he could provide the inheritance of the supreme willpower realm of various paths in the future, or even the inheritance of willpower. With the help of these inheritances and other enhancements, the chances of a quasi-supreme will realm expert under him advancing would only increase. In the future, it was not impossible for the total number of supreme will realm experts under him to exceed the total number of supreme will realm experts in the supreme great cosmos. At the thought of that future, Zhou Zhou could not help but look forward to it. After a while, Zhou Zhou regained his composure. He shook his head and looked at the other content of the war summary. Even though the battlefield of the Yellow River region had ended, it welcomed an even more dangerous and rewarding battlefield of the Eternal Continent. Therefore, the total number of battlefields under him remained unchanged. Apart from that, the biggest difference in today's war was that among his spoils of war, there were some treasures with transcendent wills. These were naturally all thanks to the supreme luck and the only Lord Talent. Under normal circumstances, this was actually impossible. This was because his Lord Talent, Supreme Luck, was only a Supreme Lord Talent. Logically speaking, the highest it could drop was a Supreme Will Realm Loots. However, not only could it drop spoils of war at the Supreme Will Realm, it could even drop spoils of war at the Transcendent Realm. This surprised Zhou Zhou. For this reason, Zhou Zhou specially asked Bodhi Supreme. Bodhi Supreme's answer answered Zhou Zhou's doubts. If I only give you a simple Supreme Lord Talent, it's no different from no reward for you. You're already a grade 4 Supreme Sacred Body to begin with. When you advance your Supreme Sacred Body to the Supreme Will Realm, you can rely on yourself to increase this Supreme Luck Lord Talent. Bodhi Supreme said lazily, if that's the case, why would the Supreme Will give you a reward that you can obtain by yourself in a short period of time? Those who don't know might think that the Supreme Will is stingy. Therefore, in order to reward you heavily, he only raised your heavenly fate Di Huang to the Supreme, the only level. However, in this Lord Talent, it added a little power of will transcendence. It's precisely this bit of willpower that allows you to have a chance of obtaining transcendent level spoils of war when you have the Lord Talent of Supreme Luck. But Bodhi Supreme suddenly stopped talking. But what? Zhou Fight asked anxiously. Why was this guy so anxious? He had to stop at the most critical point. However, the Supreme Will only provided you with a trace of willpower transcending level power. Therefore, the probability of you dropping a transcendent level treasure is very low. Don't look at the high probability written on your Lord Talent interface. In fact, the probability of you being able to drop a treasure or a holy artifact is much lower than this. This is also why your avatars killed so many Supreme Will Realm experts. But the will that dropped surpassed holy artifacts, and only that seductive holy eye. If you want to drop more transcendent holy artifacts, you can only start with numbers. As long as you kill more enemies at the Supreme God or Supreme Will Realm, the number of transcendent treasures or holy artifacts dropped will increase. So that was it. Zhou Zhou came to a realization. No wonder his Supreme level, unique Lord Talent could drop loots that exceeded the level of willpower. It turned out that it was a compensation secretly given by the Supreme Will. Well, if it was just to give him a Lord Talent at the level of Supreme Will Realm, he actually didn't need the help of the Supreme Will at all. This was because he had a lot of Lord Talent crystal fragments and Lord Talent spheres. He could completely absorb it all and rely on itself to advance the Supreme Sacred Body from a grade 4 Supreme Sacred Body to a Supreme Will Realm Supreme Sacred Body. At that time, he, who had the Supreme Will Realm Supreme Sacred Body, could have any Lord Talent that he wanted to advance to the Supreme Will Realm. It was the same for Supreme Luck. Just like how there was a Supreme Unique Lord Talent every day in the past, he could completely have a Supreme Lord Talent every day as long as he advanced the Supreme Sacred Body to the Supreme Will Realm. And it was precisely because the Supreme Will knew this that it specially let him, Supreme Luck Lord Talent, have a little of the elegance of a transcendent Lord Talent. Just as Bodhi Supreme had said, the probability of dropping a treasure with a will that exceeded the level or holy artifact was very low. However, there were too many of them. Today, his clones had killed many Supreme God and Supreme Will Realm experts in the past 2 days. These enemies had dropped at least tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of Supreme God-level spoils of war. According to the introduction on the surface of the Supreme Luck, it was normal for these loots to be upgraded to thousands or even tens of thousands of treasures with transcendent wills. However, just as Bodhi Supreme had said, even though his spoils of war could be 100% quality plus 1, 0.01% quality plus 2, that was only relative to spoils of war at the Supreme Will Realm and below. When it came to loots with transcendent willpower, the probability of them dropping was extremely low. It was precisely because of this that his clones had led an army to fight to the death today, but they had only obtained a low-level transcendent holy artifact, seductive holy eye, and 121 God-tier herbs, God-tier ingredients, God-tier ores, God-tier blueprints, and other treasures. Zhou Zhou didn't care anymore, even though it was a pity after sighing for a while. He was already very satisfied to be able to obtain loots with transcendent willpower in advance. It was just a small number. He could completely accept it. Then when my supreme luck advances to the transcendent level, the only Lord talent, the probability of my loots +1, +2, and so on should be normal, right? Zhou Zhou asked. Of course, at that time, there will also be a 10,000% chance that your supreme god-level loots will become transcendent-level loots. Your willpower level holy artifact level loots will also 100% become transcendent-level loots. However, the upper limit is only loots with transcendent willpower. Even the Supreme will can't do it. The Bodhi Supreme encouraged. Zhou Zhou nodded. Of course, any higher would be spoils of war at the eternal immortal level. The Supreme Will was only a top-notch expert with a transcendent will. How could he create an eternal spoil of war? When the time comes, he would probably have to rely on himself to raise the supreme sacred body to the eternal immortal level, and then create the eternal immortal Lord talent to obtain the eternal immortal loots. However, at that time, he would already be a peak expert of the great cosmos. Did he really need those things? Even if he needed it, it probably wouldn't be of much use. The strength of an eternal realm expert had already reached the peak after all. There was probably no need for external things. He shook his head and didn't think too much about it. That realm was still too far away from him, a supreme god. There was no point in thinking too much. Then, he looked at the number of chaos divine treasures in his hand. After a series of conquests, gains, and consumption, Zhou Zhou saw that the total number of chaos divine treasures in his hands had reached 100,000 units. Zhou Zhou nodded slightly. This number was already twice the total number of chaos divine treasures needed to upgrade to a grade 2 supreme god territory. He was not happy. Instead, he looked at Zhou 16's situation in the Yellow Heaven Great Cosmos. Zhou 16's Holy Sun Divine Kingdom had conquered a total of 10 beginner grade master god tier kingdoms and 4 intermediate grade master god tier kingdoms today. Then, he looked at the situation on the High Continent. Under Zhou managed arrangements today, the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom had established a total of 5 beginner grade master god tier kingdoms in the High Continent and had them under its command. In the end, Zhou Zhou looked at Zhou 15's situation. Zhou 15 led the Succubus Divine Kingdom today and spent a lot of resources in the Crimson Great Cosmos to help the high-level Divine Kingdom Scarlet Lord faction under him establish 3 beginner grade master god tier kingdoms. Zhou Zhou was deep in thought. Now, if the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom wanted to upgrade its territory to a grade 2 supreme god-level territory, it needed to conquer 10 intermediate grade master god tier countries. They needed to conquer 30 beginner grade master god tier kingdoms in the Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos if they wanted the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom to advance to a grade 1 supreme kingdom. He had already conquered 4 intermediate grade master god tier kingdoms and accepted 8 beginner grade master god tier kingdoms in the Supreme Great Cosmos and the Crimson Great Cosmos. It seemed like there was still a huge difference. However, the gap had clearly narrowed. Zhou Zhou was satisfied. It was so convenient to have a clone to help him work. If he worked alone, he did not know how much time and energy he would have to spend to reach this level. Moreover, his cultivation would definitely be delayed. Unlike now, there was no delay anywhere. Then, he looked at the final battle report. That was the battle report that Zhou Marshall had summarized. It said that the High Continent had already submitted to the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom under the continuous and comprehensive conquest of the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom, which meant the current High Continent could be said to be the private territory of the 3rd Reserve Army of the Supreme Lord, Zhou Zhou. However, it was still a little short of officially becoming Zhou Zhou's private territory. The key point was, kill an enemy of the illusionary race suppressed at the bottom of the High Continent. Zhou Zhou still did not know who this enemy was. The reason why Zhou Marshall knew about this was that after he led the Blazing Sun Divine Kingdom's army today and conquered the last high-level Divine Kingdom Lord faction on the High Continent, a message appeared in his mind, telling he that only by suppressing or killing the illusionist clan powerhouses suppressed below the High Continent could he truly become the ruler of the High Continent. Even though this powerhouse of the illusionist clan was suppressed by the Supreme Will, he still had the strength of a low-level will. Zhou Zhou frowned slightly after reading Zhou Marshall's report. It turned out that after conquering the High Continent, there was actually a guardian boss. He thought that if he conquered all the lords in the entire High Continent, the High Continent would completely belong to him. The strength of a low level will transcend it. It's a little difficult, Zhou Zhou muttered to himself. His current strength was only at the top supreme will realm. He was far from being a match for an enemy with a transcendent will. It was the same even if the other party was an enemy of the illusionist clan who had been suppressed by the supreme will for an unknown period of time. The supreme will realm and will transcend it. Even though it was only a difference of a large class, the difference in combat strength between the two could be described as worlds apart. He could already be considered a peerless genius to be able to resist the strength of the will with the strength of the supreme will realm. Moreover, one had to be at the mid-level supreme will realm or even the high-level supreme will realm to be able to resist a willpower expert. For example, Spring Autumn Dharma Lord or God King Heaven Punishment. As for the supreme god who went against the will of the strong, if he said it, it would only make people laugh. It could only be said that this person did not have any common knowledge about the cultivation world to be able to ask such a question. The supreme gods and willpower powerhouses. One was the upper limit of the god-spirit system, and the other was the upper limit of the willpower system. The two of them were not only two major realms apart, but also the difference between two major cultivation systems. From ancient times until now, and even after countless years, no expert could cross this gap. The entire ultimate void cosmos might have produced peerless geniuses like God King Heaven Punishment or the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord who could defeat those with transcendent wills. However, to use the body of a supreme god to surpass two realms and two systems to defeat a powerhouse with transcendent will, this had never happened in the ultimate void great cosmos. Even the top experts of the eternal immortal realm had never done such a thing. If anyone could really defeat a willpower expert 2 levels above him as a supreme god, this expert would definitely be the unprecedented #1 genius in the ultimate void great cosmos and even the illusionary great world. Moreover, it was the kind that no expert could surpass. Even those who came later would feel despair towards this record. That was because this record was too difficult to surpass. A genius who could do this would definitely be an unsurpassable peak in the history of the ultimate void great cosmos. When I become a true supreme will realm expert, I'll let Zhou Marshall challenge this sealed expert of the illusionist clan. Many thoughts flashed through Zhou Zhou's mind before he finally made this decision. If the supreme god could not do it, he would do it after advancing to the low-level supreme will realm. He believed that at that time, even if he was only a low-level supreme will realm expert, he would definitely be able to fight the sealed expert of the illusionist clan. Zhou Zhou closed the battle summary and did not immediately return to the reincarnation sacred palace to continue cultivating. Instead, with a thought, he disappeared. In the next second, he had already appeared outside the divine kingdom, in the supreme domain. Zhou Zhou looked at the supreme domain in front of him, and then looked up at the rain of laws that kept falling from the sky. He reached out to touch it. Drops of nomological rain landed in his hand, turning into nomological comprehension that fused into his body. Zhou managed smiled and shook his head. There was a time when he first came into contact with the nomological rain. He was immediately shocked. He wished he could cultivate in the supreme domain every day. However, how long had it been? When he faced this rain of laws again, the storm in his heart could be described as extremely calm. To him, this rain of laws was no different from ordinary fruits and vegetables when he was an ordinary person. It was useless to eat it, but it was a pity to abandon it. He was about to embark on the path of will, and the nomological path was close to perfection. This rain of nomological laws that contained low-level and chaotic nomological comprehension was already useless to him. At this moment, a powerful aura appeared in the distance and quickly flew over. When he passed by Zhou Zhou, he immediately exclaimed in surprise. Then, he immediately changed direction and came in front of Zhou Zhou. Zhou Zhou looked at the person. This was a supreme will realm expert. From his aura, he should be a low-level supreme will realm expert. He wore a fiery red divine robe and had dense and arrogant fiery red hair on his head. His entire body emitted a violent and manic aura of fire. However, what surprised Zhou Zhou was that when he looked into the other party's eyes, he realized that the other party's eyes were as calm and gentle as water. The other party's gaze and the aura around his formed a sharp contrast, but this contrast was abnormally harmonious, as if they were born like this. Information about the other party appeared in Zhou Zhou's mind. Low-level Supreme Will Realm Expert. Fire God's Will. The nomological path this expert took at the beginning was the Tao of fire control. Later on, he even advanced to the low-level Supreme Will realm with the will of the myriad Fire God King. This person had a lot of friends. Even though his personality was sometimes extremely fiery, he would also reveal his unique gentleness to the friends he acknowledged. They were considered the kind of experts who were more suitable to make friends among the more than 50 Supreme Will Realm experts in the Supreme Great Cosmos. The Fire Heart Will under Zhou Zhou's command had also transformed into a Supreme Will Realm existence with the Law of Fire. In terms of strength, the two sides were actually on par. This was because even though the Fire Gods Will had already advanced to the Supreme Will Realm for many years, and the Fire Heart Will was only a super newcomer who had just advanced to the low-level Supreme Will Realm for a day, the Fire Heart Will had an entire set of Will Holy artifacts on him. According to his understanding, this Fire God's Will did not even have a single Will Holy artifact on him, but he had a quasi-Supreme Will Divine artifact. Even though it was a quasi-Supreme Will Realm Divine artifact, it was naturally far inferior to a true Will Holy artifact. It was still comparable to the Fire God's Will because of the enhancement of the Will Holy artifact, even though the Fire Heart Will had just advanced to the Supreme Will Realm for a day. If it was a true life and death battle and one could use his entire set of Will Holy artifacts at will, the Fire Heart Will could already rely on its Will Holy artifacts to defeat a mid-level Supreme Will Realm expert and guarantee that it would not die in front of a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. As for the Fire God's Will, it could be easily defeated. This was a comparison from the perspective of strength. In terms of potential, the Fire Heart Will was still superior. The will potential of the Fire Heart Will was clearly higher than the Fire God Will. From Zhou Zhou's observation, it was already very difficult for him to advance to the mid-level Supreme Will Realm in the future, let alone the high-level Supreme Will Realm. Even though the Fire Heart Will was a new expert, his will potential had reached the high-level Supreme Will Realm. It was very likely that he would advance to the upper Supreme Will Realm in the future. As for why Zhou Zhou could tell that the Fire Heart Will had such high potential, it was naturally because Zhou Zhou had given he an inheritance of a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. At the same time, the Fire God's Will was also sizing up Zhou Zhou. The more he looked at it, the more alarmed he became. This was because he realized that the other party was clearly only a grade 4 Supreme God. But for some reason, when he looked at him, he always felt a sense of horror that made him tremble in fear. It was as if as long as he dared to show any malice, what awaited him would definitely be a thunderous blow. Was this a freaking Supreme God? The will of the Fire God was stunned. As a Supreme Will Realm existence, he naturally trusted his intuition. Therefore, this could only prove that his feelings were right. This Supreme God could really pose a threat to he, and could even easily destroy him. At this thought, a name couldn't help but flash through his mind. You're the third reserve army of the Supreme Lord, His Highness, the common people's regal? The Fire God's Will hesitated for a few seconds before finally taking the initiative to ask, "Exactly, you're the will of the Fire God, right? I know you." Zhou Zhou smiled. "Greetings, Lord of all races." When the Fire God's Will heard this, it confirmed that its guess was correct and immediately changed its attitude and bowed respectfully. This time, he knew where the threat was coming from came from. This was a ferocious person who had killed an high-level Supreme Will Realm expert at the Grade 3 Supreme God Realm. God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord had never done such a thing. It was very normal for it to bring him a sense of danger. "Get up," Zhou Zhou smiled. "Since we are participating in the banquet together, let's go together," Zhou Zhou said. "My pleasure," the will of the Fire God hurriedly said. Then, the two of them flew towards the venue of the ceremony, which was also the center of the Supreme Domain. The Fire God's Will asked curiously as they flew and chatted, "Your Highness, where are your two newly advanced Supreme Will Realm offerings?" They had just advanced to the Supreme Will realm and had experienced many battles today. They had many insights. I'm currently in a place where time is accelerated to absorb these insights. However, I'll be here on time. Zhou Zhou said casually. I see. The will of the fire god came to a realization. He was not surprised. This was how true experts were. Strength was everything. They naturally had to absorb any new comprehension and convert it into their strength immediately, not come here to flatter and socialize with others. If they really did that, wouldn't they be neglecting the essentials? Such a life form could not become a top-notch expert. Anyway, he just had to come on time. The will of the fire god did not ask further and headed to the location of the ceremony with Zhou Zhou. They arrived at the location of the ceremony. This was a floating island. The island was very large, comparable to 1/10 of the total area of the boundless universe. On this floating island, there were a lot of delicacies. The lowest of these delicacies were supreme, god-level delicacies. Most of them were at the Supreme Will realm, and a few were even delicacies that surpassed the level of will. When Zhou Zhou saw this scene, he could not help but smile. He couldn't take out such a banquet with his current foundation. It would be good enough if they could gather 1/10,000, as expected of a welcome banquet personally organized by the Supreme Will. It was generous. Other than the banquet, there were also a large number of attendants serving members. These attendants were slender and beautiful, and there were people of all races. However, even though they looked racial in terms of appearance and size, Zhou Zhou could sense that they were actually life forms born from drops of extremely concentrated nomological rain. They could be shortened to nomological life forms. If nothing unexpected happened, these nomological life forms should have been created by the Supreme Will. The current mission was to satisfy the needs of Supreme Will realm experts like them. Apart from these nomological life forms, the rest were true Supreme Will realm experts. There were a total of 15. Most of them were low-level Supreme Will realm experts, and only 3 were mid-level Supreme Will realm experts. Zhou Zhou nodded slightly. It seemed that the Supreme Will realm experts were not all here. Just as he and the will of the fire god were about to find a place to sit down, a nomological life form walked over and asked he respectfully, "Are you His Highness, common people's regal?" "I am." Zhou Zhou nodded. The nomological life form's eyes lit up, and his tone immediately became much more enthusiastic. However, he knew his limits very well and did not make Zhou Zhou feel that he was very presumptuous. "Your Highness, common people's regal, your seat has long been arranged by the Supreme Will. Please follow me," he said respectfully. "Sure." Zhou Zhou was not surprised. He turned to look at the will of the fire god, who quickly waved his hand and said, "Lord Common People's Regal, don't worry about me. I'm going to my seat too." "All right, we'll talk when we have time." Zhou Zhou nodded. The fire god's will was delighted. How could he not tell that the other party had the intention to befriend him? Was he actually so valued by the common people's regal? It could actually make him say such things personally? The will of the fire god was very happy. This was a new noble whose combat strength had reached the top Supreme Will realm and had nurtured 2 new Supreme Will realm experts under him. They were not something a low-level Supreme Will realm expert like him could compare to, be it strength, status, or even connections. To be able to obtain the admiration of such a big shot, he was naturally excited. Zhou Zhou did not think too much about it. He followed the nomological life form to the core banquet of the welcome ceremony. Then, the nomological life form pointed at the gorgeous chair beside the huge table and said respectfully, "Your Highness, common people's regal, your seat is here." Zhou Zhou took a look and was shocked. Why was his seat placed in the second position? Let a grade 4 Supreme God be the second? Even though he had made outstanding contributions, was it really possible? Is there a mistake? Zhou Zhou was puzzled, but he asked with a smile, "I didn't make the wrong arrangements. This is a seat personally arranged by the Supreme Will. Your Highness, you don't have to worry." The nomological life form knew what Zhou Zhou cared about and said with a smile. Zhou Zhou did not ask further and sat down. He had top-notch Supreme Will realm combat strength, so he naturally did not have much worries. He did what he wanted to do. The reason why he specially asked was because he felt that the standard was a little too high and was puzzled. Since he possessed confirmed that there was no problem with the standard, he would sit normally. "What's your name?" Zhou Zhou asked the nomological life form. He clicked his tongue in wonder. This nomological life form had the strength of a grade 1 Supreme God, but he was only a waiter here. It could be seen how high the level of this welcome banquet was. The nomological life form was pleasantly surprised, but he still asked politely, "Your Highness, my name is Qing Ming." "Sure," Zhou Zhou nodded. Seeing this, Qing Ming did not say anything else. After bidding farewell, he left. Zhou Zhou watched as the other party left and made a mental note of this name. He was someone by the Supreme Will's side after all. There would be no harm in getting to know each other, even though it was not difficult for him to ask the Supreme Will directly with his current status. At the same time, the moment Zhou Zhou sat down, all the nomological life form servants and the Supreme Will realm experts who were already present looked at Zhou Zhou. All kinds of thoughts appeared in their minds. The nomological life form attendant naturally did not dare to discuss the matter of the third reserve of the Supreme Lord, Zhou Zhou. However, some veteran Supreme Will realm experts had already begun to discuss among themselves. Is this that common people's regal? He's so young. He's indeed ridiculously young. According to my observation of the other party's fate line, he's not even 25 years old, but he's already a grade 4 Supreme God now. He's even killed a top Supreme Will realm expert. This is too shocking. Back then, when the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord and God King Heaven Punishment were at their peak, they couldn't even do such a thing. I didn't expect this junior to actually surpass those two. Not over 25 years old? Are you kidding me? I'm at the Supreme Will realm of the path of destiny's will. Do you think I'm wrong? If it's true, there's a high chance that this third reserve army of the Supreme Lord in the future will create a greater undertaking than the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord and the God King Heaven Punishment. That's still far away. Let's see if he can grow up. That makes sense also. The Supreme Will's judgment is really unparalleled. If only I could find such a successor. You're dreaming. Is such a successor someone we can meet by fate? Dream on. As expected of a Supreme Will realm expert, his attack power is indeed strong. The Supreme Will realm experts discussed in private. Zhou Zhou could also hear what they were talking about, but he didn't care. At this moment, a low-level Supreme Will realm expert stood up and walked towards Zhou Zhou. With this fellow's opening, the other Supreme Will realm experts could no longer sit still and walk towards him. They surrounded Zhou Zhou. Most of them were at the low-level Supreme Will realm, and only 3 to 5 were at mid-level Supreme Will realm. At this moment, their attitude towards Zhou Zhou was very respectful and even a little flattering. Your Highness Common People's Regal, I'm the Will of Time. It's our first time meeting. Please take care of me in the future. Lord Common People's Regal, I'm the Will of the Frozen Cloud. I have an extreme ice shrine in the extreme ice divine world. If you have time, you can come to my place to take a look. I'll definitely entertain you well. Lord Common People's Regal, I'm the Will of the 5 Elements. I've admired your reputation a long time ago and knew that you're a shallow water dragon. You'll soar into the skies sooner or later. It seems like my judgment was right. Lord Common People's Regal is already in a high position now, huh? Lord Common People's Regal, I'm the Will of the Acacia faction. I have the Acacia faction under my command. Every 10,000 years, they will recruit 100 beautiful women from the myriad worlds. There are women from all races. Give me a warrant, and I'll send someone to send it to you immediately. Lord Common People's Regal, I'm. The Supreme Will realm experts introduced themselves to Zhou Zhou, afraid that they would fall behind the others. Of course, there were people who wanted to befriend Zhou Zhou, and there were naturally people who disdained such behavior. However, even though they disdained their fawning actions, none of them jumped out to object to slapping Zhou Zhou in the face with all the Supreme Will realm experts present. Everyone was a top-notch expert who had cultivated for countless years. They still understood the basic ways of the world. Of course, most importantly, the Common People's Regal had long used his top potential, top strength, and top forces to subdue them. Otherwise, if he relied on his status as a reserve army of the Supreme Lords, he would definitely not be able to subdue this group of peak experts of the Supreme Great Cosmos. The combat strength of a top Supreme Will realm expert and the true realm of a grade 4 Supreme God were enough to make this group of Supreme Will realm experts who thought highly of themselves obediently shut up. It's so lively. Looks like I'm a little late. At this moment, a faint voice sounded. When Zhou Zhou heard this voice, his eyes lit up. He immediately stood up and pushed away this group of Supreme Will realm experts to come outside. Brother, Zhou Zhou said happily. Brother, the reincarnation Will, who had just arrived at the ceremony, smiled and said, I wanted to be the first to come, but I had something to deal with in the netherworld at the last minute and had to delay for a while. Brother, You won't blame me, right? Brother, what are you talking about? Zhou Zhou shook his head. How could I not know about the situation in your netherworld? I'm already very surprised that brother can come so early. The grand ceremony hasn't started yet. The Yellow River region had just returned, and the endless souls that had wandered the myriad worlds had returned to the netherworld. Zhou Zhou did not dare to imagine how busy the reincarnation will had been during this period of time. He was already prepared that the reincarnation would not come. Brother, you understand me. The reincarnation smiled and looked at the supreme realm experts surrounding Zhou Zhou. He smiled and waved his hand. Continue with your work. I'll go to my seat. With that, he bade farewell to Zhou Zhou and headed for his exclusive seat under the lead of a nomological life form. Zhou Zhou originally wanted to chat with his brother for a while longer, but he did not force him, seeing him like this. He also returned to his seat and chatted with the supreme realm experts surrounding him. He didn't reject anyone. No matter who wanted to communicate with him, he would communicate with them amicably. When these supreme realm experts saw Zhou Zhou's performance, they were secretly surprised. Typically speaking, such an expert who became famous at a young age would more or less have some arrogance on him. However, looking at the common people's regal in front of him, not only did he become famous at a young age, his strength and faction were also top-notch. The blazing sun divine kingdom of his was probably second only to the sun divine court and the great lunar court. As for the backer behind him, it was the supreme will. Under the layers of buffs, this common people's regal actually did not have any arrogance on him. Unbelievable. The supreme realm experts thought so in their hearts. At the same time, they admired the common people's regal even more. Not far away, the reincarnation could not help but sigh when he saw the common people's regal surrounded by the supreme realm experts like stars surrounding the moon. Thinking back, in his eyes, this wise brother was just a junior he thought highly of. Now that time had passed. Not only had this junior become the third reserve army of the Supreme Lord, the master of the Yellow River realm, the master of a top faction, and the youngest top supreme realm combat power possessor. All sorts of titles had raised his status to a level that even he had to look up to. And such a person was actually so humble and friendly now. I've really acknowledged an amazing brother. He has created too many miracles along the way. Reincarnation sighed sincerely. At the same time, he was sincerely happy for his younger brother's current achievements and performance. After a while, most of the Supreme Realm experts were already here. Only a few Supreme Realm experts had yet to arrive. And these Supreme Realm experts who arrived later all went to befriend Zhou Zhou without exception. The heaven-defying plot that Zhou Zhou had imagined of coming over to provoke because he was young and had only risen for a short period of time, did not happen at all. At this moment, the Fire Heart will, the Tao Breaking will, and the Heavenly Blade will had finally arrived. We've experienced some battles previously and occasionally had some comprehension. We had no choice but to absorb it, so we delayed some people. Please forgive us, seniors. As soon as the Fire Heart will and Tao Breaking arrived, they apologized to the Supreme Realm experts for their late arrival. Even though the Supreme Realm powerhouses were indeed a little uncomfortable, they could tell that what the other party said was not a lie. In addition, on account of the common people's regal, they did not say anything to blame them. Instead, they expressed their agreement with them. When the Fire Heart will and the Tao Breaking will saw this, they could not help but sigh that the atmosphere in the supreme great cosmos was really good. There was not even a powerhouse who blamed them. Then, they were led away by the two nomological god spirits to the backstage of the ceremony before they could sigh. Not surprisingly, they should be meeting the Supreme Will and preparing the content of their next speech. As newly advanced Supreme Will Realm experts, they still had to have a basic process like speaking. At this moment, another figure slowly walked over from afar. He held a faint yellow scepter. On the scepter, an illusory river of time and space was slowly flowing. It seemed to reflect all the past, modern, and future of the myriad worlds. It was the eternal scepter, and the one holding the eternal scepter was naturally the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord. Hello, everyone. The moment the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord entered, he greeted the Supreme Realm experts present with a smile. When he saw Zhou Zhou, he gave a strange look, making Zhou Zhou speechless. The moment the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord entered, he greeted the Supreme Realm experts present with a smile. When he noticed Zhou Zhou, He gave he a strange look, making Zhou Zhou speechless. His attitude was not inferior to his attitude towards Zhou Zhou. In fact, it was even better. If Zhou Zhou was considered a late-stage rookie, the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord could already be considered to have transformed from a rookie to a big shot after all. He was an existence that had personally killed a willpower expert. Even though his strength was still at the mid-level Supreme Will realm, his combat strength and status were already comparable to a low-level willpower expert. There were less than 5 such experts in the entire Supreme Great Cosmos. Therefore, their enthusiasm for the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord naturally exceeded their enthusiasm for Zhou Zhou. Zhou Zhou also saw the change in their attitude, but he didn't care. However, he didn't care, but the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord cared. After he chatted briefly with the surrounding Supreme Will realm experts, he quickly walked to Zhou Zhou's side. A nomological life form originally wanted to come over and bring the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord to his seat, but when he saw where the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord was sitting, he immediately retreated without saying a word. This was because that position was where the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord was. Third brother, you're here so early? The Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord smiled. I'm bored. Zhou Zhou shrugged. Normally speaking, experts of high status like us should be ranked last when we appear. The later you appear, the more low-level people will pay attention to you. This is in line with the ostentation of the strong. Moreover, this is also beneficial to the low-level people. It's quite stressful for those weak people to suddenly appear in the middle of a group of strong people with high statuses. If they comes to chat with you, they will look flattering and low. If they don't chat with you, they will look unique and ignorant of the rules. They will be easily ostracized. And us experts don't like a group of people surrounding us and making it noisy. Don't you agree? The Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord instructed. Zhou Zhou actually felt that it made sense. The Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord suddenly said just as he was about to say something. However, rules have always been set by the strong. You are strong, so you can come whenever you want. This is the style of the strong. I didn't expect third brother to already understand the essence of it despite your young age. I'm impressed. Zhou Zhou, wasn't it just an attendance time? Why were there so many rules? Zhou Zhou and the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord chatted again. Even though the other powerhouses who saw this scene were curious about what they were talking about, they did not dare to approach casually. They was also rather surprised. Recently, it was rumored that the Common People's Regal was competing with the Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord for the 2nd Reserve Army of the Supreme Lord. Logically speaking, they should be competitors now, but from the looks of it, they clearly had a good relationship. What was going on? At this moment, look, God King Heaven Punishment is here. Go, go, go. Hurry up and welcome this fiend. The fiend is here. Every time I see him, I'm afraid. Let's go, let's go. What's there to be afraid of? This person has long stopped killing his own people. The Supreme Will realm experts discussed and walked towards the entrance. The Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord glanced at them and turned to Zhou Zhou. Shall we pick up Big Brother together? Let's go. Zhou Zhou agreed without hesitation. He happened to be very curious about this Big Brother whom he had known for a long time. Supreme Lord's 1st Reserve Army? I want to see what this 1st Reserve Army is capable of. Zhou Zhou thought to himself. The Spring-Autumn Dharma Lord smiled and stood up with Zhou Zhou to walk towards the entrance. Along the way, they hurriedly made way for them to travel together when the Supreme Will realm experts saw the two of them come out. Seeing this scene, Zhou Zhou could not help but sigh at the high status of this Supreme Lord Reserve Army. Even a Supreme Will realm expert had to obediently make way. He did not know. This attitude also depended on the person. In the past, the Supreme Will realm experts had also held banquets of a similar scale. At that time, Lord of 10,000 Evils, who was still grade 4 Supreme God, had also come because of his status as a reserve army of the Supreme Lord. In the end, even though these Supreme Will realm experts respected each other because of their status as Lord of 10,000 Evils, they all looked down on Lord of 10,000 Evils with the attitude of seniors. The Lord of 10,000 Evils was naturally unhappy about this, but he did not say anything due to the difference in strength. However, ever since then, he rarely participated in meetings of this scale unless it was necessary. This was because he understood a principle. If he wasn't strong enough, participating in a meeting of this level meant that he would be looked down upon by stronger people. As for someone like Zhou Zhou, he had already killed a top Supreme Will realm expert before he reached the Supreme Will realm. Such a terrifying combat strength performance was enough to make any Supreme Will Realm powerhouse respect them, and even make them place Zhou Zhou on par with the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord and God King Heaven Punishment. This was because in their eyes, if they could kill top-notch Supreme Will Realm experts at the Supreme God level, they might be able to kill transcendent-level experts at the Supreme Will Realm like God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord in the future. Such potential was enough to fill them with respect for Zhou Zhou. Zhou Zhou and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord arrived in front of God King Heaven Punishment. Big brother, the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord smiled at God King Heaven Punishment. Second brother, the God King Heaven Punishment smiled and nodded. His temperament was very gentle, and it was impossible to tell what relationship he had with the nickname. He turned to look at Zhou Zhou, and his eyes lit up. He walked forward and grabbed Zhou Zhou's shoulder. He sized him up, and black lightning flashed in his eyes. Then he said in satisfaction, as expected of our third brother, in the future, there will be a will that transcends. What? Wow! His Highness, the common people's regal, indeed has a will that transcends. No wonder he could kill a top Supreme Will Realm expert before he reached the Supreme Will Realm. After the Supreme Will Realm experts heard God King Heaven Punishment's words, they were immediately shocked and disgusted. Zhou Zhou also heard their discussion and could not help but look puzzled. You're wondering why I can tell that you have the will to transcend, right? God King Heaven Punishment smiled and pointed at his eyes. My eyes are called the Heaven's Eyes. They are a talent with a transcendent will. In front of such eyes, nothing can hide. Then can I advance to the eternal immortal realm? Zhou Zhou asked curiously. The Spring Autumn Dharma Lord and God King Heaven Punishment looked at each other and saw the smile in each other's eyes. As for the Supreme Will Realm experts behind them, there was only a strange expression on their faces. Advance to the eternal immortal realm? This Supreme Lord's third reserve army was really daring. Even the Supreme Will who had cultivated for so many years could not advance to the willpower level. How dare a brat like that think of it? They more or less looked down on him. Even though this junior had extremely high potential, he was too ambitious. He was not even at the Supreme Will Realm, but he actually dared to cross 2 levels and think about the beauty of the eternal immortal realm. However, just because they thought so did not mean that God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord thought the same. They looked at Zhou Zhou, whose eyes were filled with pure curiosity and anticipation. Their eyes were very gratified, and there was only one thought left in their hearts. This child is like me. Looking at the Supreme Will level powerhouses with contempt in their eyes, they did not show anything on the surface, but their hearts were filled with disdain. These useless people who did not even dare to think about that realm were the ones who were really not worthy of being looked at by them. The God King Heaven Punishment shook his head in his heart. Then he said gently to Zhou Zhou, I can't tell if you can advance to the eternal immortal realm in the future, since that level already belongs to the true peak of the great cosmos. They has already transcended the system of willpower and is an absolute supreme expert. No life form can be above them. I can tell that you have the will to transcend. It's only because my heavenly punishment holy I discovered that the nomological skills on you are very extraordinary. All of them have the potential to advance to transcendent skills. You're only a grade 4 supreme god, but you can comprehend such an extraordinary nomological technique. That's why I said that you have the same willpower as me and second brother. After God King Heaven Punishment finished speaking, he said softly, the eternal immortal realm is an existence that can't be measured or even looked up to with potential. To advance to that realm, the requirements for potential, opportunity, will, luck are unbelievably high in all aspects. You're only a supreme god now. You still don't understand. When you reach the level of your second brother and I one day, you'll understand how difficult it is to reach that realm. Forget about the eternal immortal realm. Even if it's willpower, it's a hurdle that's very difficult for us to cross. The Spring Autumn Dharma Lord nodded in agreement. Zhou Zhou did not say anything else. Then, the other two, and them, did not stay any longer. They arrived at the seats. Moreover, Zhou Zhou was in second place. God King Heaven Punishment was in third place, and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord was in fourth place. God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord were not surprised or indignant when they saw Zhou Zhou's seat. The two newly advanced Supreme Will Realm powerhouses that were to be welcomed today were nurtured by their third brother after all. He had contributed greatly. With such contributions, it was very normal for him to be arranged to be in the second seat. The God King Heaven Punishment looked at Zhou Zhou and sighed. This welcome ceremony seemed to be to welcome the two new supreme gods, but the real protagonist was actually their third brother. His fourth brother not coming again. The God King Heaven Punishment did not think too much about it and asked after seeing the empty fifth seat. It's not like you don't know his personality. Spring Autumn Dharma Lord smiled and shook his head. He has never liked such seats. It's all a matter of strength. If he is at the Supreme Will Realm or like third brother, whose combat strength has reached the Supreme Will Realm, who would dare to say anything about him participating in this ceremony? The God King Heaven Punishment asked indifferently. The Spring Autumn Dharma Lord nodded. Zhou Zhou did not express his opinion. However, at this moment, he heard a happy voice. Third brother. Zhou Zhou was stunned and looked over. The Lord of 10,000 Evils was walking over excitedly and happily. Then, he sat on the fifth seat and smiled. Third brother, I'm here. Hello. Big brother, second brother. The Lord of 10,000 Evils said respectfully to God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. Zhou Zhou, God King Heaven Punishment, and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord looked at him in surprise. The God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord never expected that their fourth brother would actually participate in this grand ceremony at the Supreme Will Realm today. Didn't he never like to participate in such gatherings that were higher than his strength? Zhou Zhou didn't think too much about it. He smiled and stood up to bring him to the fifth seat. This was the seat of Lord of 10,000 Evils. Even though the Supreme Will also knew the habits of Lord of 10,000 Evils, every time there was such a gathering, he would always leave a place for his successor, even if he wouldn't come. Third brother, I'm late. The Lord of 10,000 Evils said apologetically. I was subduing demons in the heavenly shine great world. There was a quasi-Supreme Will Realm demon in that world that delayed me for a long time, so I came late. Third brother, don't blame me. Why would I blame you? I'm already very surprised that you're back for this welcome ceremony. Zhou Manage smiled and shook his head. Ever since he and Lord of 10,000 Evils officially no longer had a competitive relationship, the relationship between the two of them had also heated up rapidly. Currently, the friendship between the two of them was second only to the friendship between them and the reincarnation well. He sized up Lord of 10,000 Evils and suddenly said in surprise, "You're about to advance to the Supreme Will Realm?" This was incredible. It had to be known that he had only found out some time ago that Lord of 10,000 Evils had advanced to the quasi-Supreme Will Realm. How long had it been before he actually showed signs of advancing to the Supreme Will Realm? What a fast advancement speed. The God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord also looked at Lord of 10,000 Evils in surprise. As expected, they were surprised to discover that the will aura on the other party's body was actually about to transform into a Supreme Will Realm will. Just as Zhou Zhou had said, he was indeed about to advance to the Supreme Will Realm, and there was almost no possibility of failure. This was because the other party's foundation was extremely solid. It felt like he had accumulated a lot. It was probably not impossible for Lord of 10,000 Evils to advance to the Supreme Will Realm in the future. The two of them could not help but have some thoughts and doubts. The Supreme Will had previously arranged for him to stay in the ultimate void battlefield. Was it to sharpen him so that he could shoulder the heavy responsibility of being a Supreme Lord's Reserve? Or was it to establish his foundation and have more potential in the future? If the latter was true, then the Supreme Will's foresight was simply unimaginable. This was using the status of a Supreme Lord as bait to let Lord of 10,000 Evils have a pragmatic foundation. Who could have such boldness and structure? Lord of 10,000 Evils and Zhou Zhou naturally did not know what their two brothers were thinking. When Lord of 10,000 Evils heard Zhou Zhou's words, his expression was also very emotional. He nodded and said, "Ever since I gave up on the idea of fighting for the position of Supreme Lord, I seem to have been enlightened a lot. I can gradually understand most of what I didn't comprehend in the past. This also made my willpower level advance by leaps and bounds, allowing me to have the signs of advancing to the true Supreme Will Realm. I feel that it won't be long before I can advance to the Supreme Will Realm. I feel like it's because of my experience in the ultimate void battleground that I've honed my mentality and will to this point. Otherwise, with my aptitude, even though I might advance to the supreme will realm earlier than this, it's almost impossible for me to take another step forward and set off for the will realm. And now, the Lord of 10,000 Evils said seriously, I feel that even if my willpower is weak in the future, it's not impossible for me to advance. It's a blessing in disguise. Zhou Zhou felt a little emotional when he heard that. At the same time, he was sincerely happy for him. He had the same thoughts as God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. The ultimate void battlefield was probably a training ground specially left behind by the Supreme Wilfer Lord of 10,000 Evils. As for whether the other party could defend the ultimate void battleground, the Supreme Will probably did not care at all. With the strength of the Supreme Will, even if Lord of 10,000 Evils could not defend the ultimate void battlefield one day, it was not too late for the Supreme Will to personally save the situation after all. With strength, one could willfully nurture their successor. It did not matter even if he took some risks. It's really a good thing that fourth brother can have such good fortune. The God King Heaven Punishment laughed loudly and held a cup of wine with transcendent will in his hand. He raised his cup to Lord of 10,000 Evils and said, I'll congratulate third brother first. I hope you can advance to the Supreme Will realm as soon as possible and be on par with us. I know of a multiverse mystic realm. There's a fruit of will inside him. It's very good for tempering the will of a Supreme Will realm expert. Counting the days, it's time for it to mature. After you successfully advance, I'll bring you along and pluck that fruit for you. The Spring Autumn Dharma Lord chuckled and said, Since Big Brother has said so, I can't fall behind. How about this? After third brother advances to the Supreme Will realm, you can enter my Fish Harvest Treasure Vault. Be it a Supreme Will realm treasure or a Transcendent Will treasure, as long as it's in the Fish Harvest Treasure Vault, I'll let you choose. After God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord finished speaking, it was Zhou Zhou's turn. Zhou Zhou was not afraid. In terms of foundation, he might indeed be inferior to God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. However, these two fellows could not catch up in terms of helping him advance. Fourth brother, Zhou Zhou smiled and said, Come back to Shenyang Shrine with me later. You can cultivate in my Reincarnation Sacred Palace. With the assist of the Reincarnation Sacred Palace and my various Lord talents, I guarantee that you can advance to the Supreme Will realm in 3 days. In addition, after you advance to the Supreme Will realm, I can give you a set of Will Transcendence Inheritance to help you reference your future advancement path. The God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord could not assist, but look at Zhou Zhou. They did not expect that this third brother, who had just been promoted, was not inferior to them in terms of generosity. In fact, he was even better. It had to be known that in the content of this brother's words, not to mention the matter of helping them advance, just the set of Will Transcendence Inheritances mentioned at the end had already surprised them. That was a Will Transcendent Inheritance. Even to them, it was a very precious treasure. His third brother was actually so generous as to provide it away. They gazed at each other and saw the surprise, admiration, and satisfaction in catch others' eyes. Their third brother had not embarrassed the two Supreme Lord Reserve armies in terms of extravagance. Even though they had just met, from the looks of it, they were very content with Zhou Zhou. Really, the Lord of 10,000 Evils was also very amazed by Zhou Zhou's promise. Advancing to the Supreme Will realm in 3 days? This was an unbelievable time for him to advance. Even though it sounded like he was only a step away from advancing to the Supreme Will realm, this step stopped countless quasi-Supreme Will realm experts. There were about 100 quasi-Supreme Will realm experts in the Supreme Great Cosmos. However, not a single one of these 100 or so Supreme Will realm experts could successfully advance to the true Supreme Will realm. It had been more than 100,000 years since the last Supreme Will realm expert was born. It was obvious how difficult it was to advance to the Supreme Will realm. Even though Lord of 10,000 Evils already had the comprehension to break through the bottleneck and had a high chance of advancing to the Supreme Will realm, even so, he was still prepared to fight a protracted battle. In his estimation, he should be able to advance to the Supreme Will realm in 100 years or 10,000 years. This was already a good estimate. The Lord of 10,000 Evils even felt that using 100 years to advance to the Supreme Will realm was already the fastest speed. He did not expect his third brother to be even faster. 3 days. Wasn't this too exaggerated? No matter how much he trusted Zhou Zhou, he was still somewhat hesitant. But soon, he recalled today's welcome ceremony and immediately abandoned all his worries. This third brother of his could even directly nurture two quasi-supreme will realm experts he had never known into supreme will realm experts, shocking the supreme will, and specially holding this welcome ceremony. He actually did not trust third brother? Was there something wrong with his brain? As for the will transcendence inheritance that followed, it tempted Lord of 10,000 evils even more. After he advanced to the supreme will realm, the first thing he had to consider was how to continue on the path of will in the future. He was a newly advanced supreme will realm expert after all. Even though he had a limitless future and a will to transcend, he was still very confused about the future path. As for a will transcendence inheritance, even if it could only be used as a reference, it was enough to illuminate the direction and path of him. To him, it was naturally priceless. Of course, Zhou Zhou smiled and said, "When did your third brother lie to you?" "Thank you, third brother," the Lord of 10,000 evils said happily. At this moment, a group of nomological life forms spoke in unison and respectfully. "Welcome, Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar." In the next second, all the nomological life forms, Supreme Will Realm experts, Lord of 10,000 evils, and Zhou Zhou turned around. Regal Great Solar? Regal Great Lunar? Zhou Zhou was very curious. These were even more mysterious characters than the God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord. Among the Supreme Will Realm experts, their strength was firmly ranked first and second. It was said that they were second only to the Supreme Will and the Crimson Overlord, two will transcendence level experts. The Supreme Will Realm experts had no objections to this. Even God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord had never objected to this. It could be seen that these two were really strong. Moreover, it was said that these two, as well as the Sun Divine Court and the Great Lunar Court under them, only served the Supreme Will. They were direct descendants of the Supreme Will and were deeply trusted by it. All Supreme Will Realm experts would never provoke these two factions unless they had no choice, no matter how arrogant they were. He had heard of these two top factions a long time ago. Was he finally going to see their true appearance today? Zhou Zhou saw Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar. Unlike before, the Supreme Will Realm powerhouses did not surround and greet them like they did to welcome them. Instead, they stood on both sides of the road cautiously and respectfully, like subjects, letting them pass through the middle path, showing their respect. Anyone who saw this would exclaim in their hearts, "How awe-inspiring." As for Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar, they were extremely impressive in terms of appearance and attire. The Regal Great Solar was wearing a golden robe with patterns that flowed like lava. The hem of his robe surged like a burning corona. There were 9 blazing sun totems embedded in his shoulder armor, and a sun carving that symbolized the supreme star-sun star. His face was dignified like cast gold. His eyes burned with 2 eternal suns and holy flames. Deep in his pupils, the trajectories of the stars circulated. His long hair was like the flowing flames of the stars. It moved without wind, and sparks scattered. At the ends, the high-level will holy artifact sun wheel corona of light hung above Eli's head, and the phantom of 9 suns unfolded behind him. He stepped on the golden chariot transformed from the sun god dragon, and as he walked, he looked awe-inspiring. The Regal Great Lunar was not inferior either. She was wearing a long silver dress with wide sleeves. The sleeves of her dress were as ethereal as cold fog and were embroidered with ice crystal laurel patterns. She was draped in silk that looked like the hanging of the galaxy. There was a white jade bracelet around her waist. When they collided, they made a clear sound like a spring. His skin was as white as snow, and his eyes were as cold as a deep pool of still water. His eyes were suffused with a blue moonlight, and his lips were as pale as a blooming epiphyllum. The high-level will holy artifact, the great lunar mirror, floated above his head. A low-level will holy artifact, the full moon wheel, appeared behind him. He stepped on the mid-level will holy artifact, the cold jade toad palace. Silver laurel petals floated around him, and there was a faint phantom of the moon soul spirit. Fox. Even though the two of them were high-level Supreme Will Realm experts on the surface, even among the Supreme Will Realm experts, their aura and dignity were like a crane standing out among chickens, very conspicuous. They walked over step by step, surrounded by a group of attendants from the Sun Divine Court and the Great Lunar Court to prevent them from being bumped into by other ignorant people. This pressure, Zhou Zhou was secretly alarmed. He had also fought a high-level Supreme Will Realm expert. However, the pressure on them was far from what Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar could compare to. The pressure on Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar was simply like a willpower expert wearing the skin of a Supreme Will Realm expert. No wonder these two were undisputed first among all the Supreme Will Realm experts. Even the God King Heaven Punishing and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord were meaningless to this. He didn't have any objections after he looked at him. He looked at God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord and realized that they was also looking at them with a serious expression. It seemed like these two had a story with Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar. Zhou Zhou thought to himself. At this moment, he suddenly realized that the gazes of God King Heaven Punishment and they had landed on him. Zhou Zhou was taken aback before he quickly realized why they was looking at him, because the Regal Sun and Regal Great Lunar, who had attracted countless gazes, were walking towards him in front of everyone. They arrived in front of Zhou Zhou. They looked at Zhou Zhou before Regal Great Solar revealed a warm and friendly smile. At this moment, even though Zhou Zhou's Will Realm had already reached the low-level Supreme Will Realm, he could not help but feel a little dazed. He even had the illusion that the other party was his family. He suddenly came back to his senses and could not help but be shocked. What is going on? Just a smile made me in a daze. I'm an expert with a low-level Supreme Will Realm will after all. What level of willpower does the other party have to be able to achieve this? An answer naturally emerged in his mind. Will transcendence. Only an extraordinary will could make Zhou Zhou sink into it with just an expression. It turned out that the wills of Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar had officially advanced to the transcendent level. Zhou Zhou was shocked and enlightened. No wonder. This alone was enough for them to be called quasi-intentional transcendent level experts. According to what he knew, the current level of will of God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord had only reached the high-level Supreme Will Realm. Just this point alone had already widened the gap between the two sides. At the same time, Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar looked at Zhou Zhou in surprise. It was actually just a moment of distraction that allowed him to escape the influence of their will. Just this alone was something that even God King Heaven Punishment and the Spring Autumn Dharma Lord could not do back then. No wonder the Supreme Will valued this successor so much. The potential of this successor's will seemed to be unexpectedly high. Common people's Regal Great Solar smiled and said, "This is the first time we've met. You're much more outstanding than this emperor imagined. Your Majesty, you flatter me." Zhou Zhou stood up and said politely. The Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar smiled and shook their heads when they heard Zhou Zhou's humble words. However, they performed not say anything. Regal Great Lunar said, "If you're free, you can come to my Great Lunar Court and the Sun Divine Court. I'll definitely go when I have time." Zhou Zhou mentioned seriously. Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar nodded in satisfaction. "Then we'll wait for you to come." Regal Great Lunar? With that, the two of them actually flew into the sky together and sat down in the sky of the ceremony. The invisible palace quickly changed from nothing to reality. The sky where Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar were turned into two noble and luxurious palaces. The Supreme Will Realm cultivators gazed up at Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar in the palace, as if they were looking straight at the supreme star origin will of the sun and moon stars. This. Zhou Zhou gazed at them, sitting upright in the sky, and was momentarily stunned. Previously, he was curious about where the two of them would sit after they arrived. The first seat belonged to the Supreme Will, and the second seat belonged to him after all. Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar would definitely not sit in the remaining seats. They were too far behind after all. Now, they had actually done such a thing. So there was a private seat in the sky. Zhou Zhou had the urge to complain crazily. At this moment, at the welcome ceremony, all the Supreme Will Realm experts were already here. Zhou Zhou roughly counted. There were a total of 55 Supreme Will Realm experts present, including Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar. Including the Fireheart Will and the Tao-breaking Will, there were 57 Supreme Will Realm experts. Zhou Zhou nodded slightly. This was the first time he understood the exact number of Supreme Will Realm experts in the Supreme Cosmos. At this moment, the Supreme Will finally appeared. He first mentioned a few simple words to the Supreme Will Realm experts present. Then, he let the Fireheart Will and the Tao-breaking Will appear and introduced himself to the Supreme Will Realm experts present. When they said that they were experts from another universe and had advanced to the Supreme Will Realm under the nurturing of the common people's regal, they acted very surprised, but they did not say anything. After that, it was time for the normal host and guest to enjoy themselves. During this period, the Supreme Will had also come to the first seat to chat with them for a while and praise Zhou Zhou. Zhou Zhou appeared flattered and accepted the praise of the Supreme Will Realm expert. He promised that he would definitely nurture more Supreme Will Realm experts. The Supreme Will encouraged Zhou Zhou before leaving. During this period, he observed that Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar stood up. They only sat down again after the Supreme Will left. More than an hour later, after 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, Zhou Zhou was ready to leave before the welcoming ceremony ended. It was naturally not a problem for they to drink for a long time, but he was busy continuing his cultivation and did not have the mood to waste time here. When God King Heaven Punishment and they heard this, they had the same thoughts. Then, they prepared to leave together. However, at this moment, a voice appeared in Zhou Zhou's mind. It was Regal Great Solar's voice. "Young friend, come to my place for a chat." When Zhou Zhou heard that, he was first stunned and did not think too much about it. After informing God King Heaven Punishment and them, he flew into the sky and arrived in front of Regal Great Solar and Regal Great Lunar. "Young friend, Regal Great Lunar, and I have a favor to ask." The Regal Great Solar went straight to the point. Zhou Zhou was stunned. These 2 big shots who had at least a low-level will and transcended combat strength were actually begging him. What was there to ask for? I was a little confused as he said, "I don't know what I can do to help the 2 seniors." "Senior, why don't you tell me first? If I can really help, I will definitely help. It's not a big deal." The Regal Great Solar laughed and said, "This emperor saw that your territory is protected by great luck. So he wanted to send some talented supreme gods to your territory with Regal Great Lunar to train and cultivate.